Hey, Tosa.
You're so nice. Well, welcome everyone. This is Robin Luther. I'm with Tosa Together, and I wanted to welcome you to Tosa Talks, building a diverse, thriving community. This is an ongoing Facebook Live series that's proudly sponsored by our generous sponsors at our friends at Bostic Industries. Tosa Talks features 3 monthly presentations designed to provide meaningful discussions around racial and social justice issues to support the work of building an inclusive and anti-racist community. We're excited tonight for a presentation with Corry Joe Biddle, Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce Vice President of Community Affairs and Executive Director of FUEL Milwaukee. Corry Joe will be discussing the MMAC's Regional Choice Program. And the presentation is part of the Tosa Talks organization track that streams live at 7 p.m. on the last Thursday of each month. But today is the first Thursday. That's because we were postponed from Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Please also join us for the personal story track on the second Tuesday and the equity and inclusion track on the third Wednesday of each month. All of our presentations are recorded and are later available for viewing and sharing on this Facebook page or on Tosa Together's YouTube channel. I'd also like to, before we start, encourage you to take part in our live question and answer session tonight. You can add your questions and your comments for our speaker into the Facebook comment section during the presentation. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our guest, Corry Joe Biddle. Hello there.
Hi.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Robin.
Excellent, excellent. If you don't mind, I'm going to read a very nice little bio about you before we get started. I'm sure people want to hear more of my voice. So I'll try to do this well and fast. Corry Joe, as I mentioned, serves as the Vice President of Community Affairs for MMAC. She promotes the association's mission to improve Metro Milwaukee as a place to invest capital, grow business, and create jobs. She's also the Executive Director of FUEL Milwaukee, which is the MMAC's talent attraction and retention organization serving young professionals. She's responsible for the oversight and development of programs, services, and events benefiting FUEL's members and corporate sponsors. She's also involved in the development of MMAC's Workplace Talent Initiative called Making Milwaukee a Region of Choice for Diverse Talent, which seeks to increase the number of African American and Latino Hispanic professionals in leadership roles. Corry was formerly the Executive Director of America's Black Holocaust Museum, and she offers a unique perspective on the relationship between diversity, economic development, and community engagement. Corry Joe graduated from Mount Mary College, just down the block, with degrees in business administration and professional writing, and has earned a certificate of leadership from the Cardinal Stritch African American Leadership Program. She is the recipient of the U.S. Postal Service's Growing Leadership Award and has been honored as one of Milwaukee Business Journal's 40 Under 40, and was also named a Rad Woman by Greater Milwaukee Women's Fund. Very cool. So before we even start, tell us.
Thank you.
Tell us what a Rad Woman Award involves.
It was, it was their first year doing it. I think there was like 26 of us that received the distinction, and they gave us a really cool book of all like hundreds of women in history who have done amazing things, and just it was just a diverse group of women, and we were just celebrated for our work and our contribution to making Milwaukee a better place.
That's very cool. You are indeed a rad woman. Well, and our first thought of inviting here tonight was to talk about the Region of Choice pledge and initiative. So I know we can probably go into lots of different directions tonight, but let's start there. Maybe you could give us a sort of a high level idea of what that program is.
Yeah, so my colleague and Executive Vice President at MMAC, Julie Granger, heads up the Region of Choice work at the pleasure of the MMAC board, working very closely with our president, Tim Sheehy. And I mentioned Julie because she's a Tosa resident, and if she's watching, hey, Julie! But we've been doing this work now. The initial idea or thought about it is probably two and a half years old. And it really came out of a survey that MMAC regularly does with the board members. to identify the assets to doing business in Milwaukee and the what are the drawbacks? Like, what are some of the challenges to growing business and investment and, you know, being able to attract talent? And overwhelmingly, all of the board members were really concerned with racial disparity and inequity, and that it was affecting their ability to really be able to attract the talent that they need to grow their businesses. So the region of choice effort sort of came out of the need for us to look at that from a business perspective. And it's just grown into really a community of not only businesses, but talent and, you know, community leaders who are more focused, I think, than ever in a collective way at approaching this and resolving it.
Right, right. What's the time frame around that? When did this all start?
We announced this, the official launch was at the MMAC's all-member meeting in September. So not the last September, so a little bit over a year ago. And there was about a year or so worth of research that was conducted before we even got to the point of launching. So there was a survey of 1,000 Black and Brown managers and you know, over 15 focus groups, face-to-face meetings with CEOs. There was a lot of work that kind of went into wrapping our mind around how we were going to quantify how we were doing as a region and where we needed to go, and, you know, what was the plan. So it's probably, I think, once the idea came about, it's probably about 2.5 years away.
Okay, that's a pretty short time frame.
Yeah,
for the amount of work that you've done. So the urgency was felt by board members, and that's what sparked the beginning of the program.
Yeah, the board members' response, I think, and that they, like I said, MMAC always is, you know, has great relationships with the business community, and our board members and our president, Tim Sheehy, is really very connected to what businesses are dealing with and what their concerns are. So it's a normal process for, you know, the executive staff folks to kind of go out to the board and say, hey, what's the top 10 here and there? And right. I don't think that it was unusual that racial disparity made the list of the challenges. I think the thing that was unusual was how high up on the list it was for the number of board members.
Right.
You know, I think all of us kind of are aware of segregation, and but, you know, this was before the unrest of the spring and summer and the killing of George Floyd, which kind of brought it to the fore for everyone. This was before that, and the board was already really, really concerned about businesses being able to survive long term without being able to recruit the talent and the diverse talent that they need. That was, I think, really was a jolt to the executive staff members at MMAC. Right. And, you know, I think Tim Sheehy, our president, really took it to heart and accelerated the process. And I mean, I think he's done really a good job of pulling in a lot of different stakeholders and moving the work forward.
What do you think it was about that time frame that, I mean, it sounded like these are issues that have been around forever, and more recently issues that people are really finally waking up to. But a few years ago, what do you think made it so urgent at that time? Who was starting to notice that hadn't been speaking up before or noticing before?
Well, so our board members are pretty much CEOs, so or very high level in, you know, the companies that make the decisions. And I think, as you know, the thing that has shifted is not so much, you know, people have always known racial disparity is an issue, but when you start to see it in the talent and your ability to be able to really attract the talent that you need, I think there's been over the years a strong business case for inclusion and diversity, and that innovation and productivity and revenue boosts as soon as you have a more diverse, you know, group of decision makers at the table. The D&I community, I think, has done a lot of good work for probably the last 10 or 15 years, getting people to understand that from a business perspective, you know, this really matters and it's going to affect your business. Now, I think, as you know, Generation Z is the most diverse generation ever. And, you know, Zers and millennials are moving into the workplace and their expectations are different.
Right.
And what attracts young talent to businesses is very different than what it would have been for their parents. And diversity is a requirement, you know? So I think the idea that recruiters are going out trying to recruit people of any background, and when they think that Milwaukee or the Milwaukee region is just this homogenous place with no diversity and no flavor, and you know, there's not prosperity for all, it's very unattractive for a lot of people who, in their ideal mind, they want to go to a city that is booming and diverse, and you know, they want the flavors and the sounds and the, you know, perspectives. And if the brand of Milwaukee is that, you know, it's this homogenous place, it's hard to attract talent.
Right.
Not just Black and brown talent, all talent. Yeah, they want something else.
Right.
And I think that shows up in a lot of ways when companies are trying to recruit really talented people that are like, no.
Yeah. Well, and especially in a remote environment now where you can work for any city that you want to.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go back a little bit. You said that you started, the process started out, so I'm taking it that the idea came about, it kind of bubbled to the top, and MMAC picked it as a priority to work on. So then that initiative started with your staff. So is it the MMAC staff that did the surveying and the focus groups? Did you?
Well, yeah, we worked with 2 consultants, one Hispanic owned company out of Chicago and one homegrown. You'll know P3, Janine Edwards, and her partner Dominique. So the consultants pretty much led the initial phase of the work, the research phase. I think I actually have kind of a cool graphic about it.
Oh, cool. Feel free to share your screen whenever you want.
Okay. Yeah, I found it. Okay, I'm going to share this so you can kind of see.
Okay.
And I might even go back, maybe if let's go off script a little bit just so I can kind of visually show you guys what I'm talking about here. So this is our board chair. It's Jonas Precinct from Manpower Group. So we have a staff of 45 people and then 2,000 member businesses representing 300,000 employees. So this is where it started. The board of directors is that 75 business leader number there. And they kind of, you know, tapped us and said, hey, this is really an issue for us. And I'll show you, I think you guys will find this interesting. This is what that survey I mentioned revealed. So the top assets, and we've heard this before from other businesses, quality of life. Folks love living in Milwaukee. It's affordable, it's beautiful, lots of amenities. The people in the workforce, folks really work hard here. You know, our work ethic is second to none. Education, in terms of higher education, we have some really good schools, particularly in the suburbs, Wauwatosa, Whitefish Bay, our higher education, economy, and the pro-business climate. So all of that is great. You know, it's kind of what we knew and expected. But liabilities, number one, racial disparities, you know, and as I said, it had been on the list before, but never consistently as, you know, a top liability that they really wanted to address.
Right. And so, brain drain and the lack of diversity mentioned again in number 4 kind of doubles down on that.
So what happened is, and I'll show this one. This is kind of the research that we did with the consultants. So the survey was over 1,000 Black and brown professionals that answered a pretty lengthy survey about what their experience has been in the workplace. What has their experience been? These are Black and brown managers.
That's an incredible number of people to survey.
And let me tell you, people, I think initially, because we're talking about workplaces, we thought people would be nervous to respond candidly, but I think people wanted to talk about it. You know, I think Black and brown people for so long, and I'm saying now, I think for years, they've been sort of gaslighted to think that what they've been experiencing hasn't been real, or is it valid, or it's all in your head. And this was, you know, a show to say, you know what, we hear you and we want to know more about what your experience. And they really showed up. I mean, I received the email to take the survey many times from different organizations and different groups, people that kind of knew about it and were excited to share it with different professional groups. So I was in the African American Leadership Program and other groups that knew that this was happening and wanted their members to be a part of it. It was fantastic.
So they put the survey out in a general sense, and then people picked up. So they sent it, I assume, to their business members, to your business members, and then also other organizations were sharing it.
Yeah, so there's like key partners that MMAC has, affiliate organizations that touch the populations that we wanted to respond. So through those organizations, in addition to, it was mostly the companies. So we sent it out to the companies and they can sort of say, okay, we're going to send this to our management level folks that are Black and brown. So it was controlled in that way. But if you go to the African American Leadership Alliance, that's all manager level Black folks. So the Hispanic Collaborative are all Hispanic and Latino, manager level folks. So they really, it's been a community effort from the start, just to get the information, just to be able to get a response from folks. It was fantastic, you know. So we had this huge response in the survey, and to sort of add depth to the survey results, there was the 17 focus groups.
17, that's a lot of focus groups.
And, you know, it was, you know, some of them were all millennial, and some of them were all women, and some of them were all Hispanic, all Black, and then mixed everybody together. And then, you know, it was, so that's why we did so many different ones. And there were so many people that took the survey that wanted to be in the focus group. So it was hard to say, no, 5 is enough. No, it was like, we had so many participants that wanted to talk about it. And they really did, you know, it was no holds barred, Robin. Like, they weren't afraid to say.
That's fantastic. Well, they must have had the backing of, I mean, if it's coming from, like, corporations are putting this out to their employees, they must have felt like their companies were really trying to make progress.
Yeah, and I kept trying to think for myself, if I was in that situation and if get it from an employer here, tell me what your experience has been here. I don't know. I think it depending on what I had been through and where I was mentally, I may have been like, you know, I don't know. These were very brave people who felt empowered and wanted to have their voices heard.
Yeah. So the next step were talkback sessions. Was that after so you had your survey responses and you had your focus group data, and then describe a talkback session. What did that look like?
So the talkback session was, we invited, I think we invited everyone who participated in the focus groups or took the survey.
Okay.
And we did it at the United Way in their really pretty volunteer center. So there was, I think, probably 300 people that came and participated, and we were able to give them we showed them the survey results because they hadn't seen them yet. Right. And then broke everybody out into discussions, like roundtable discussions. And there was even more depth into what the feedback was, but from the perspective of, like, what are the solutions? Like, what should we be doing now? Gotcha. And that's what the initial conversations were about. And that feedback helped us round out what the Region of Choice program would be from a perspective, from the HR perspective.
Okay. So just to clarify, by region of choice, you mean that you want to make Milwaukee a region that would be a choice that people would choose to work in?
Absolutely.
So it's a general, like, we're trying to make the city a region of choice.
Yes, a destination. We want, you know, you have to think about it from a recruiter's perspective. There's some recruiters that can say, hey, this is the great job opportunity. We have these great benefits. We have this and that and this and that and this and that. But a millennial and Gen Z is like, that's great, but where are you located? Because they're thinking about what their life is going to look like. Who are going to be my neighbors? What is going to be my community? Arts and culture, nightlife, quality of life, cost of living, all of these things. It's like you want to create a life, and then the job that supplements the life that you want to create. It's a mindset shift.
Okay.
So the region of choice messaging really comes from the ability to attract and retain talent from a perspective of saying, this is a beautiful community that is completely in line with how you see your life. This is a community you want to be a part of. And in some ways we can say that, but there's other ways where it's like, not really for everyone.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that's really where the region of choice language comes from. It's like really being real and honest about the concept of two different Milwaukees. As one of my somebody I learned from a lot, Marty Stein, before he passed away many years ago, was the chair at the Black Holocaust Museum.
Right.
And he wrote an article about the two Milwaukees and these two realities. And you could live on one side of Milwaukee and think everything is perfect and peachy keen, and across town somebody's having a completely different experience.
Right.
But the region of choice means that it's a region for everybody.
Everybody. Okay.
Everybody.
You know, we have a question that came in that is maybe while we're talking about surveys, it's about the surveys. Do you mind if I throw in a question?
Sure. If I can answer it, I will. I might have to text Julie and see.
Okay, if you can't, we'll just go right on.
Okay.
This person is wondering if you can comment on two things, actually. The first is what the survey found about how the hypersegregation of our metropolitan area contributed to the problem. What were people's opinions on how hypersegregation contributed to the problems of diverse, encouraging a diverse workforce?
Yeah. Was there another part to the question, or
yeah? She also, her follow-up was also, was there any evidence revealed about if racial steering was happening in terms of like people being shown housing that was in or not in suburban areas? Like,
I don't think that I have some anecdotal comments about the steering piece, but in terms of the segregation, it showed up in the responses when respondents were asked questions about whether they felt a sense of belonging in the workplace.
Okay.
And whether they felt a sense of belonging in Milwaukee in general.
Right.
And there was a lot of room in the survey and in the talkback for people to add some layers and explain what they meant by that. And there was sort of this overwhelming feeling, especially from people who are not originally from Milwaukee. So Milwaukee natives experience it, Black and brown, but it's different when you're from somewhere else and you're not used to the segregation.
And then also it hits you in the face. Yeah.
It hits you. Yeah. It's like, and I'm from Milwaukee. So, I feel it, sometimes when I'm driving up North Avenue and, it's like you start at 4th and you go up to Waukesha, you can see it. It's glaring. And I've always felt it as a native, but it's really been there's a lot of insight from the Black and brown talent, high level talent that's not from Milwaukee originally. And they come into the community and it's stark and it's shocking to them.
Right.
But there was some feedback from folks about like how they feel going to their neighborhood grocery store and the looks that they get, and that, it just, people aren't saying hi. And it's just, I just feel like people don't want me here. People make comments about going to wherever they decided to live if they would find their neighborhood church. And obviously church can be more segregated than any other moments that we have in our life. And that experience of going to church and having a very segregated church, and not just a segregation, but feeling like you didn't belong or feeling like you weren't wanted in that space. I can share a little bit of, I think this is a presentation that we've done. So there's some sort of static information that I think is just interesting to share in terms of the survey results, right? So just some data. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, here we go. So, okay. People feel that they must hide or downplay their culture in the workplace. So you can kind of see where those numbers, for both, there's about half of people that feel like they can't bring their full self to work. So we asked the question about whether the companies are investing in their talent and sending them to leadership programs. Only 18% of the Latino respondents said yes, 37%, a little bit more for African Americans said yes, and very few of either group have had executive coaches or like really high level investment. It's the kind of investment and special attention that it takes to get on that executive track, and most of our Black and brown talent, aren't
we're not experiencing that. Yeah.
They also talked about the lack of leadership for African Americans and or Latinos. You can kind of see they felt that there's a lack of senior leadership. There's a lack of modeling. There's a lack of inspiration to say this is the path that I can take to get to this place or the other one. Limited exposure to opportunities. You'll see that's pretty stark. I mean, over half of people feel like they just don't have the exposure.
Yeah.
Stereotypes, trust issues with colleagues, and discrimination. So again, and then we just pulled so many quotes from those focus groups, and it was just really hard to read people's experiences. But they're looking for leadership and representation in the workplaces, but also there was a lot of comments about the overall lack of belonging and sense of unity, racial unity in the region in general. I just don't feel like I belong here, I just don't feel like people really want me here. So
right. And we've had a lot of discussion lately about the difference between a city being welcoming or a business being welcoming or making somebody feel like they belong. I mean, you can go, you can be here for a little bit, but you don't belong. I mean, to make somebody feel really integrated into a place that's beyond welcoming.
Yeah. You feel a part of the fabric of it, like, hey.
Right. So after the survey, you went on to, you took your results of the survey, and then my understanding is that you compared how Milwaukee did to other communities. Can you describe what that was about?
Yeah, so there was, we have a research department. Tim, our president, always jokes that our research department, he talks about our research department, his name is Brett, because it's one very talented person came up with these measures of prosperity.
Okay.
So we kind of started with the idea of, okay, if this is going to be a region of choice for all, let's look at the prosperity measures for the people that are here. So what does it take? What is financial well-being and what is prosperity? And we came up with these 7 indicators. So the number of people that have a higher level position, they're officials, they're managers. The number of people that have occupations that will draw a higher income. So in management, business, science, art occupations, so on and so forth. The unemployment rate, the rate of folks that have bachelor's degrees or higher, the number of households that are led by single women, owner-occupied housing, so what's the rate of people that own their own home, and the poverty rate, right? So we kind of just set that out. That's going to be the rubric. And then what Brett did was find peer cities for Milwaukee, and the peer cities were, he had his own methodology, but in general, they were similar to Milwaukee, either in size or industry mix of companies, population. So there's just a lot of different things that he did. So he came up with a list. So once he had that list.
Similar racial makeup as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So once he had the list, they ran the rubric. I want to make this bigger so people can see it. Oh. Let me find it again.
Where'd it go?
Okay. So that'll be bigger for people on Facebook to see it. Ran that rubric with these 21 communities, right? So first, let's run the rubric with white folks. So in all of the different communities, how do white folks stack up with those 7 indicators of wealth? Right. And in Milwaukee, we did pretty good. 6, we landed 6 out of 21. So white folks in general are doing pretty good in Milwaukee compared to, our peer cities. And then we ran it with African Americans, and we were at the bottom of the list. We had the
In
worst
every single list.
for Hispanic, and then the prosperity gap between white and
Oh
Black.
my goodness. Yeah.
There's prosperity gap between Hispanic and white. And I mean, this was after, you know, the businesses that had already said, this is a concern. And then we run our own research to really look and see where we are. This is not another community telling us where this is us. This is our research.
Right.
And we're at the bottom. We were at the bottom.
So for white people in the community, you can think of yourself as being like one of the 6 most prosperous communities out of those 21 peer cities. But for Black people in our community, we could think of ourselves as being the worst among 20 other possible places to live or work.
Yep, Black and brown. So just think about the gulf that exists just because of your own experience.
Right.
And and we're segregated. So it's not like you're living next door to a family that you got close with and you can understand their perspective, because you don't see other people. We all live in these bubbles. And like, I remember when I was growing up, I grew up near Haven Woods. That was like our backyard. We used to go to Haven Woods all the time and play with garter snakes.
Way to go.
Do other stuff that my mother probably wouldn't have wanted us to do, but that it was fun. But I lived in Berryland Projects, so it was like we would go to the Boys and Girls Club over there, in the Sherman Park area. And, I went to Rufus King High School, and I went to Custer for a year, and Morris Middle School, and Golden Maier. And, for a kid, I think I had a pretty good life. But as I started to get older and think about college, it never occurred to me to stay in Milwaukee. Never, because I did not see a professional life for myself here. I think it was cool for a kid, but I didn't see anything. We never came downtown. So the hustle and bustle of downtown and the businesses and the opportunities, all of the companies, I just wasn't aware of anything. I just wasn't aware of anything. So for me, you go to college and you get out of Dodge. You don't stay here. And you can ask any young Black people that have had that same experience, brown people that have had that same experience. You think once you level up, or once you go to college, or once you get a chance to really live a good life, Milwaukee is not the place that people are generally picturing. The Milwaukee region, not even the suburbs. I mean, you just don't think about it. And it's the same for white folks. We don't understand each other's perspectives because the reality is so different. I was so poor. I used to have to dig in the couch to get change to catch the bus to school. Like if I missed that first bus and my bus pass didn't work anymore, I had to use money. And there were times where I did not have, at that time, it was only $1. I didn't have $1.
Right.
And there was people that at my school, they just could not understand that. They just couldn't fathom that. And the embarrassment of saying, I'm late because I couldn't find 100 pennies, they just could not. You could tell it's like, as a kid, I'm like, this is like, you have no clue what my life is. You have no idea.
So with that experience, you're like, when I grow up and if I want to aspire to this, I have to leave here.
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I think so. You think you're going to go to Chicago or LA at that time, everybody was going to Atlanta. You want to go where you feel like there'll be other professionals that look like you, that understand your perspective, where you feel like you can thrive, and make a good living, and, have the house that you always wanted, or that your mom always wished she could have had. And at that time, I just didn't see that for myself in Milwaukee or the Milwaukee region at all. And that was echoed again and again in the survey results, and in many conversations that I've had with people who have been Milwaukee natives. There are a lot of Black and brown Milwaukee natives that are staying in Milwaukee, or made the decision to stay, and they're making a concerted effort to not only change the narrative, but change the reality of what people's experiences have been. And until people start telling their stories, or you start to see these numbers like this, you know, it's important for folks to understand that your reality is not, it's a completely different story for somebody else.
Yeah.
Some of these kids have no idea what prosperity really looks like. No clue.
Right, right. And you can hear statistics that say, you know, Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities, and you can hear statistics about the gap. But when you know that those numbers are coming out of, those things are coming out of surveys of people that we took here, and then comparing them to other similar cities, that just makes it, it just makes it hit home so much harder. So that
Yeah.
must have really fueled, I mean, so now you're sitting at MMAC and you've got this new data, and your research department tells you, you know, Rick, is it? No.
Yeah, when he told us, hey, look, these are the 7 indicators. And
Yeah.
we were like, you know, Brett kind of said that he's so
Right. Okay. I'm
killed.
changing his name to Rick.
Oh, Brett. Yeah, Brett.
Okay.
He's so calm and even keeled and just logical, you know, and he came up with the indicators, and it's just like you just trust it because it just makes so much sense.
It does make
It
sense.
was just
Yeah.
so logical, and it wasn't biased. You know, it's not like we stacked the deck for us to,
Right.
or you know, for anything to happen. We just, hey, what is it? And it came out that way.
So when they started working on this project, and they started, you know, the data starts coming in, and people are getting a vision of what, you know, we know that people think this is a problem. Now we're confirming it really is a problem. Was there always a plan sort of fueling in the back of your mind of what was going to happen next? Or did the next thing fuel was the next step to think of, like, how are we going to address this?
So by this point, Tim and Julie had assembled a task force of people, a diverse task force of people to help them think about. At this point in the process, I became a member of the task force. So I wasn't involved in the work the way that I am now. I was more of, you know, responding and giving my input based on what I had seen from young talent and just my experience. So FUEL Milwaukee is the division or the department that I run for MMAC. So that's the relationship between FUEL and MMAC. We're essentially a department with MMAC. And our focus,
and on that a little, I'm sorry, go, yeah, you're just about to. Yeah.
So our focus is to attract and retain talent to the Milwaukee region.
Right.
And it's not specific to diverse talent, but we've worked really hard to make FUEL a very diverse organization. It's about 70% white professionals, 30% identify as people of color, you know, all professionals that live and work in the Milwaukee region, you know, in the suburbs, racing, as far as, you know, it's just sort of the 7-county region, right? So I was able to give a perspective on the task force from what I had seen and heard from young talent in terms of what it's going to take to attract and retain them, and what do they want? What kind of employers do they want? What kind of community do they want to be a part of? So I'm on this task force along with 14 or so other people. Once Tim and Julie sort of brought this information to the task force, I think it was already sort of the idea was in Tim's mind initially to say, what's the bang for our buck? If we're going to focus on something in terms of what we can control as a membership organization or influence the most as a membership organization with members who are companies, the thing that we're probably going to most be able to influence is the area of career and salary. So if we can boost the number of Black and brown people that earn a certain salary, then you are immediately going to start to affect those households and the economics around those communities that those households are a part of. So that's sort of where that came from. And I'll show you.
So you're trying to get more diverse people up that prosperity scale, which basically just means making more money and earning a good living and having tracks to good jobs.
Yep. That was sort of how the focus narrowed down.
Okay.
Because it was like, you know, there's so many things that we can influence, but what do we have the most ability to influence? And it's, you know, it's hiring and earning for people. There is a slide here where it breaks down. I'll find it for you quickly. Okay. Now these were our initial numbers that we looked at. This animation just does not want to let me be great today. Okay, here it is.
There it is.
There it is. Okay, so
what is ROC?
Region of choice. So we call it the ROC. So you'll hear people say the ROC Revs or the ROC Initiative.
Okay.
Region of choice. So our baseline data initially, we took these same numbers. So we looked at the number of employees, Black and brown, who are managers, and the number of employees who are Black and brown that work in the Milwaukee region in general.
Okay.
And looked at the overall number. So Hispanic and Latino folks are about 8% of our workforce. African American folks are about 14% of our workforce. But then you can kind of see that their management numbers don't align to the percentage of their representation. Is just not there.
Right, anywhere close.
It's not anywhere close. So the numbers that I'm showing you now is the baseline data that we use from the companies that said, yes, I want to be a part of this pledge.
Okay. How many companies? So you went out into the world and said, who wants to join this party? And so was that an evolving thing, or is there like a first cohort of companies that joined in?
It's evolving. It's ever evolving. We kind of, to have an idea of what the situation we were in, initially that data was not as specific. It actually came from EEOC data. So we looked at any company in the Milwaukee region that had 100 or more full-time employees. So that's how we figured out the percentage of Black and brown folks that represented the workforce versus those who were coded at management level or executive level. So once we had those numbers, we were able to go out to companies and say, hey, we want to affect these numbers. Do you want to be a part of it? Once the company said yes, they reported their actual data. So we shifted those numbers to real data. Well, not all of the data is real, but what I mean by real is like real ROC data. So these are companies that have actually said, yes, I want to be a part of the initiative. So we swapped that general EEOC data for actual data of companies.
Right. So now you have a baseline to start at.
Now we got that baseline.
Yeah. We had a comment come in that kind of speaks to everything you've been talking about from the Turners in Cedarburg, and they're just talking about referencing Reggie Jackson and saying we don't have a Black middle class or an area where we're living together and earning well and owning homes. So
there's really prominent African American people that have taken homes in what would be considered areas like developing areas or areas that still have really high crime rates. And I mean, Thelma Sias is one example. I mean, her home is beautiful and she has decked it out, and made an investment in that neighborhood. But there's a lot of crime still in that area. I live 2 blocks away from her and I just moved because, 2 bullets came through my house while and barely missed my kids. Like this is Thelma Sias. She's retired now, but if you know her and you know her, she worked for We Energies forever. She's a prominent person in the community, but she has had to invest in the area that is developing, and it's her choice. It's something that it was for her the right thing to do, and I admire the choice. But that would be hard for me to do. Right. Because I can't have bullets coming through my house. But if I want to live in a Black neighborhood, otherwise I'm going to the suburbs where I am now. I ended up moving to the suburbs and I'm afraid to send my kids to the public schools out here. So it's this weird, there's just no place, it's hard.
As we go on describing what's happening next with the pledge and the region of choice, we have a comment from Anne on Facebook, and she's wondering if part of this, if MMAC is doing something to help change the community culture, especially in the suburbs, because even if the corporate culture changes, it's difficult to attract and retain talent if community attitudes and behaviors don't change. If you can't move to Whitefish Bay or Wauwatosa or wherever you want to live, or Cedarburg or wherever you want to live in the metropolitan area and feel like you belong. How
Yeah.
does that, is that part of the plan, or is that another arm of the plan?
It's a part of the plan in that we realized that community partnerships were going to be necessary to really, we can affect the management number, but to really address the concerns that came through in the focus groups and the surveys, this had to be a community effort. So it's the community of, a cohort of employers, but also all of the other community organizations that sort of do this work or support this work. When we started our relationship with Tosa Together, that was part of it, is to share, this is what we're doing. Right. This is the thinking behind it. It was, it's like, okay, this is the employer initiative, but as Tosa Together was sort of formalizing and forming and spreading the word, we sort of forged this partnership to say the thinking behind what you all are doing is perfectly in line with what the companies are thinking is going to require success, with what other cities across the nation is thinking are going to, inclusion is it's not a choice anymore.
Right.
It's an imperative.
Right.
And that's the piece, that the community piece. So we want our folks to be able to, we'll probably have a broadened version of the FUEL network and a more integrated sort of social circle for people as an immediate answer to that. I need somewhere to belong. I need, to feel like I belong. So there'll be some initial knee-jerk things that we can do just because we are really good at putting together programming at MMAC. But we're doing the work now to build and forge relationships with other community organizations that are very competent and good at things that we're not good at. And that, it's just not in our mission. But we can't, it's not going to just be a management piece. We gotta all put our heads together, right, and figure this out. Right.
So now you have this first group of corporations who have wanted to become part of this. So you're talking about they've taken a pledge. What are they pledging to? What are they saying that they'll do? How do they?
Yeah. So they're wait a minute. Let me see. I can't tell if I'm. Let me share it again.
Okay.
Okay. So there's some really good visuals in here, right? So
yeah, this is a great PowerPoint.
For us, we decided that we were going to set goals, right? So 5 years out, and the goal was initially that we were going to boost the management number for Black and Brown folks by 25%. Then we went back and added a layer and said, okay, let's have a goal to increase overall employment by 15%. So those are pretty much the two easy to explain goals. When the corporate pledge, the companies that signed up for that said basically yes, that they were going to commit to working on helping us achieve those two things, and that they would every year report their baseline data and percentage changes for us, identify somebody to work with, us on a consistent basis. We got to get the CEO buy-in. They agreed to be acknowledged publicly for this, and that they would promote the pledge, and recruit other companies. So at that time, we have 110 of them now.
Wow. Okay.
There's more than this. This slide is outdated a little bit, but there's 110 that have signed the pledge and said yes, to all of those things.
So regardless of how many companies start coming into this pledge, you're working off of those baseline percentages and trying to grow that by 25% by 5 years from now.
Yeah, so we pull the initial baseline data, and we'll do that every year so that we can see where we are from year to year. Now this is going to be reported out in aggregate, so it's not like we're going to be putting any one company on the spot. We're reporting the achievement as a cohort of companies.
Like a group weigh-in.
Yep.
Okay. That's very cool.
Don't step off. Nobody step off.
That's right. Don't give yourself away.
Right.
When we talked before, you mentioned that there's kind of two arms. Like you can grow, some companies may not be able to create a much bigger workforce. They might be limited in how many people they can hire and how much change they can affect. But you talked about that other sphere of bringing in suppliers.
Yeah, there was a lot of a talk initially from that task force. There were so many different ways that we could have gone, and so many different things. There was some initial conversation about the role of supplier diversity for companies that can't necessarily, maybe they don't have the scale or size in their employment pool to achieve certain levels. So we would encourage them to do other things. Now that's been formalized, and it's going to be even more, the lens of what we're doing, I think, is going to evolve even more than what we initially decided the goals were going to be.
Right.
It's not, we're not sure about everything yet, but I just have a general sense that there's going to be more and more options for companies to say, I can play in this space, I can play in all of the spaces, but to give them some options to really be a part of the effort.
So in that case, when that evolves more formally, it would be like companies choosing suppliers who have a more diverse workforce over suppliers who have a very homogeneous workforce or a very light workforce.
I think it's probably going to be, there's some companies that are really good at this already. Manpower Group is one of them, but I think it's really going to be an option for people to increase their spend. So their diversity spend. So when, if you are already buying products and services and you don't have special relationships, maybe you're just, putting out a bid, or you're just going based on price, or, suppliers that you just have always worked with, what if there was an opportunity for you to specifically choose to work with a minority supplier?
Yeah.
And we made it easy for people to say, hey, look, these are, these are the Black owned companies that supply what you guys are already, have. So I don't know that, it was just sort of an idea when we initially first started talking about it, but I think the board and executive team are going to build out some of these options, and there's probably more than I'm privy to right now, but there's the feeling that we have to give companies some options and opportunities to participate and actively be a part of the success.
Right. One thing, our time is flying by so quickly, but when we were first learning about this, most of the people that I know in Wauwatosa learned about it because the city of Wauwatosa is one of the groups that took the pledge. And my first interpretation of that was that Wauwatosa pledged to try to make its businesses more diverse. But I've since learned that actually it is the city of Wauwatosa as an employer is part of this pledge. So is that echoed across Milwaukee, or are we how are we? Well, we can't tell how we're doing because we're reporting in aggregate. But
yeah, well, you're the first city to sign the pledge. Although we work really closely with the city of Milwaukee, which has a similar initiative for tax collecting entities, which is why they have a very similar goal. So they're doing the same work. It's just under a different umbrella. But yes, as an employer, so whenever you're thinking about the folks that are going to work at City Hall, the people are going to be police officers or whatever it might be, if as an employer you're approaching that from the same lens as all of the other employers in terms of like, are there opportunities to diversify the candidate pool first and increase the probability that we'll be able to offer the job to a diverse hire. That's really what the effort is about and what the city of Tosa signed up for.
Right. Which will ultimately reflect a different sense of belonging in Wauwatosa too.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of the benefits. There's so many benefits to diversity and inclusion and this equity work, but a lot of it is the more people that are at the table to point out the blind spots, the fewer blind spots we have, because people of color are going to see things that other identity groups are not going to see.
Right.
And things that are structural or things that are oppressive or exclusionary might not read that way to someone who hasn't been oppressed in that way or excluded.
Right.
But, you know, when you show up to the table and you see it because you've experienced it, it's like, hey, you know, let me call this out, and you know, hey, let's look at this. Let's look at this a different way. This is how this could affect the bottom line. That's what the benefits are to really truly having belonging, because you can have diversity and folks not feel like they belong and they won't say anything. They'll see a blind spot and be like, here we go again.
Right.
But if there's true belonging, right, then you feel like your voice is meant to be heard and people want to hear what you have to say.
Right. We have a comment about, or somebody's asking, it kind of goes to that same point, but from the other side. If you are a white person who considers themselves an ally of this effort, how would you assist your coworkers or other people of color in, and this person's asking, particularly people who do not hold management roles, what can somebody, just a regular worker at a company, do to drive more diversity in the workforce and drive more diversity in their management? And or how can they be allies in this effort?
Yeah, so I should say that we do have a group of HR folks that are driving the culture piece. So it's not just the management number. There's a lot of talk and conversation around culture and the culture of inclusion and what it really takes to have people feel like they can show up 100% and feel and contribute in a way that they know they belong and that their voice is heard. So that's folks who are representatives in the human resources department, the diversity department, you know, growing leadership, burgeoning leadership, employee resource groups. There's a huge collection of people that are coming together regularly under this ROC umbrella to do that work. And a lot of the conversations that we're having are about how employees interact with each other, how employees are able to report things that they see as injustices or just little, this doesn't feel right. What's the process to be able to have folks be able to engage in that constant correction for every company? It's going to be different for every organization, but those are the kinds of conversations that we're having. And the conversation around inclusion and being able to produce a feeling of belonging as a core competency for every leader, especially if they manage people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes people think of D&I sort of like as a department or like there's this little area, but there's a really active movement now to move away from that thinking to say, no, this needs to go across the entire organization.
So it's a culture rather than a policy.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even so as what does your marketing look like, and what is your customer service doing, and like everybody.
Yeah. So as a white employee, you could, you know, like if you're a white employee and you've noticed that you're having your manager's meeting with everybody, but he hasn't called out Bill yet, and Bill is a person of color, you can say, you know, we haven't heard from Bill.
Yep.
And help amplify that diverse input anyways.
Yeah, I think
not in a position of deciding things. Yeah.
It's because it's important for people to know within their identity group what their perspective is and the access to information they have and the influence that each group has. So, you know, I through FUEL, we've been doing these race bridge conversations.
They're great. Yeah.
Thank you. About racism. So we did a panel today of all white men. So we had 4 white leaders. We were talking about, you know, what is the white man's role in dismantling racism, really, which is a conversation. It was very interesting because I never had that conversation before with white men. But a lot of that conversation was about knowing that sometimes the people who are least likely to speak up about racism are the ones that should, because you're the most likely to be believed. So a lot of Black and brown people know. Now, if I go in here and report this and say that this was racist, maybe it was a microaggression, or it was a, you know, very passive aggressive kind of thing that somebody said, but you know what it was. Everybody in the room knows what it was. But microaggressions are, you know, when you explain them, they don't sound like it was to experience it. And it's easy for people to kind of brush those off.
Right.
But the studies show when white people mention what microaggressions to other white people, they're way more likely to be believed.
Okay, that's distressing and good at the same time.
Yeah, but it's like it's like because they're so unlikely to say something about it that
Right.
when they actually
Right.
do and say something to another white person, be like, you know, such and such made a comment and it was a little off, and I think it hit the room in this way, and I was uncomfortable. Now, if I said that, I might get an eye roll. Like, here she goes again. I've got
Right, right. But then that opens up that space for somebody else to consider that as their experience too.
I think when you see it, it's like a lot of us see things, and your sensitivity, some of us are more attuned than others.
Right.
You know, depending on where you are in your journey, you might be, as a white person, very aware of microaggressions or very aware of the structural things that you might see things that other people don't see. But if you point it out, it hits differently.
Right.
You know, and it's just the, you know, for good or bad, it's just what it is. But it's just why we need allies. It's why we need allies.
Right. Well, our hour has flown by. I want to check. I think we've covered the questions that are in the chat box. And thank you, everybody, for adding good questions.
Great question.
Corry Joe, is there anything big that we missed or that you'd like to end with? Final thought before I hate to even stop talking to you. I think we could go all night here. We might have to do part 2. But anything you want to leave us with in relation to this program, or just to your personal thoughts on the state of Milwaukee, or your call?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you guys are doing in Wauwatosa is awesome. I mean, we have all got miles to go before we sleep. I mean, there's so much more work to do, but just the having the conversations and talking about it. I just, you know, after our webinar today, there was a sense of, you know, white people do have a role in this work. Mm-hmm. And I just want to remind people of that your voice is important, and what you see and how you feel is important. And I think sometimes, you know, because of the racism and the pain that we all have been through as a result of it, it's not always said that we need everybody's voice to fight racism, but we do. Right. Every identity group has a place in this conversation, and keep talking and keep pulling people into your neighborhood, keep making people feel welcome. I mean, I've been recruited more than once, you know, like people are selling Wauwatosa on me all the time. So keep doing that because it matters.
Oh, do come live in Wauwatosa. This would be lovely for all of us.
Yeah, I would, you know, it's like, I'm like, there's some great folks in Wauwatosa, and they're doing really great work. And the warmth and the concern, and even though we don't all have the answers, but it's like the struggle.
Right, it's the struggle. Yeah.
The fact that we like struggle together is what's gonna bond us, you know, so let's just keep doing it.
Yeah, and we can, it's hopeful, very hopeful. It's a good time of year to think about how maybe in next year we'll make even more progress.
Yep, even more.
Well, thank you so much. It's just such a pleasure to talk to you. You're just really fun to talk with. And I really appreciate all the information you shared with us and the insights that you gave us. And your nifty slides were very cool. It was really good.
Yeah, we do. We actually have a great marketing team. Her name is Carrie.
That's hysterical.
And MMAC is a team of people who are really, you know, as Dr. Cameron at the Black Holocaust Museum, you say, freedom loving people. We got a bunch of
loving people. This is good. It's a good club for us all to be in. So thank you, Corry Joe. It was such a pleasure. And I also want to thank our Facebook audience for your time and your comments and your questions. I hope you found this as enlightening and inspiring as I did. And of course, a special thank you to our friends at Bostik for making Tosa Talks possible. We really appreciate their support. You can reach out to Tosa Together anytime through our Facebook page or through our website, or by emailing us directly at tosatogether@gmail.com. And I also should say before we go that please join us next Tuesday, December 8th, for our personal stories track. That night, our guest is going to be Whitney Rise Robertson, who grew up in Wauwatosa and now lives in Wauwatosa, raising her own children in Wauwatosa as a Black woman. She's going to be discussing that experience, her personal experience having that, and also the many factors and thoughts that went into leading her into advocating and protesting for racial justice. So once again, thank you, Corry Joe. I'm Robin Luther from Tosa Together. It is my pleasure to be here with you and with all of our audience. Thank you, everybody, for being part of Tosa Talks and our mutual effort to build a diverse, thriving community. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.